Hello, my name is Bernard Conlon. This is another edition of Local Angle on Europe. Today I'm joined in the studio by the UK Independence Party councillor for the Kilkeel district, and we're speaking on the day after a milestone by-election result in the southeast of England, Rochester Strode. I'm joined by Henry Reilly. Welcome to the studio, Henry. This must be quite a significant day for you. Your party now has got its second member of Parliament.
Yes, indeed, Bernard. Thanks for the invitation. And indeed, UKIP right across the United Kingdom, all our membership are very ecstatic today, given that Mark Reckless was returned with a very significant majority of almost 3,000 votes. And given the huge effort that the Tories in particular, and also a lot of what we would term establishment media, they didn't do Mark any favours. So it really is a remarkable victory. There's no question or doubt about that.
Right. Do you think the majority, it was a majority of approximately 2,000, I think?
It was 2,900,
right.
Almost 3,000.
Right. In your view, is that majority, is that sufficient, do you think, to ensure victory in the general election?
Well, the number crunchers suggested that on a 50% turnout you would need 5%, a clear 5%, and it was 51% turnout and he got 7.3%. So it should be enough to maintain that majority at the general election.
Okay. So the issues, were there local issues, or was it the broader issue of Europe and all that you think played in the...
What UKIP is starting to explain to the general public is that a lot of the ills that our country's gone through now and been subjected to, a lot of the problems that are arising are as a direct result of EU directives. And people are starting to realise now that the European Union isn't some benign cash cow that sits in Brussels, and it's actually a very insidious force that, directs a lot of people's everyday lives, from basically everything that you do now is the result of an EU directive. And immigration, while we've been very fortunate in Northern Ireland in that we've attracted very high quality people from Eastern Europe, if you go to other parts of UK, particularly the south of England, they've just been literally swamped with people, and it's creating a lot of housing issues, education, health issues, and I can understand why people are concerned about having these open borders that we can't control while we're in the European Union. Okay.
I know the reason I asked you to come in today was essentially because of the Rochester Strode by-election. It's a timely thing, and the general election isn't that far away. It's in May 2015. But just before we go and speak a little bit more on the broader issues, can you just give me a little bit about your background, your political evolution, where you were? I'm sure some of the viewers may know, but I'm sure there are many others that don't know. So if you can say, and then why and how and when you joined UKIP.
Well, always was interested in politics, even as a child, and when I became a teenager, I joined the Young Unionists Association, which was the youth wing of the Ulster Unionist Party, and then I progressed on into the senior party and would have been a helper to Enoch Powell at that time. He was the constituency MP for South Down. And then I was elected to the existing Newry Mourne Council back in '89, so I've actually 25 years done now. Doesn't seem like that though. And 7 years ago, we noticed that the Ulster Unionist Party, or I noticed that the Ulster Unionist Party was becoming very Europhile and actually used to fly the European Union flag over its party headquarters and that type of thing. And this is what at a time whenever the fishing industry was being really badly interfered with by
Are you from Kilkeel originally?
I'm from Kilkeel.
Okay.
I just live outside Kilkeel at a place called Cranfield.
Right.
And then I switched to the UK Independence Party.
And the fishing issue was one of the big issues.
It was one of the major issues, yes. Because at that time the Spanish were getting access to what's known as the Irish Box, which is a large part of the Irish Sea, and those were areas that Northern Irish fishermen and West of England fishermen would have traditionally used, and these foreign national crews were getting access to our fish while our fishermen were being paid off and their boats tied up. It just didn't seem to make sense to me. And
so that was the start of
yes,
a reflection on the common fisheries policy.
Enoch Powell had originally instilled distrust of the European Union, but in the early 90s, in particular, I would have been quite open to aspects of it because I did see some benefits of it. But the longer I became the longer I served as a councillor, every time I wanted to do something, you would go to the Director of Environmental Health or the Director of Finance and say, look, I've got this idea. Oh, we can't do that. It doesn't comply with this legislation or that legislation, this EU directive or that EU directive. And it suddenly, it became increasingly obvious that we're not in control of our own destiny in this country. And that everything you do as an elected representative is subservient to an EU directive.
Right.
And those EU directives are concocted in secrecy in Brussels.
Right.
So
just go back, can you explain your position within UKIP within Northern Ireland? Can you also say how many councillors you have and a little bit about your relationship with, I mean, you would consider obviously yourself a unionist party, what your relationship with other unionist parties are?
Well,
go back to the
within Northern Ireland, the structure of the party in Northern Ireland. I'm the chairman of UKIP Northern Ireland, and we've now got 7 councillors, and we have an MLA at Stormont, David McNary. David came over to us from the Ulster Unionist Party 2 years ago, and he has developed there's a whole infrastructure that's developed around him, and he brings a lot of experience to the parties, a lot of contacts within government and various political parties right throughout the whole of the United Kingdom and even in the United States. He is a very formidable character. So he has brought a lot of skills and expertise that we were lacking, and in the most recent elections then I was returned for the new Super Council here, and we got councillors elected in other areas in Northern Ireland. So the party really is progressing. In terms of relations with other parties, we'll work with anybody from right across the political spectrum. Our membership would be reflective of the community here, in that we have a lot of Protestant and Catholic members, and then we've actually got quite a lot of people who are second generation UK citizens who live in Northern Ireland and can see the benefits of maintaining the UK in the way it is and not allowing it to slip down this EU road. So the party really has progressed very, very well over the last number of years.
Okay.
Whenever I joined the UK Independence Party, my former colleagues up here in the council offices, they said that the UK would get more votes in the Eurovision Song Contest than Henry Reilly would, and I think we've proved them very wrong indeed.
Okay, well, let's not go into Eurovision. That's a bit pitch for a serious programme item like this. What do you say about when people say that UKIP don't lack solid policies, that they're a one-issue band? That's often thrown against UKIP.
Well, it's completely untrue. It may have been true 20 years ago, whenever the party was formed as a direct result of the Lisbon Treaty being signed, whenever it was a one-issue party at that time, and that was to extract us from the European Union. But since then, if you look at the way the party has developed, it's actually matured into a very able party nowadays. We've got fantastic party spokesmen, and in terms of Northern Ireland at the Assembly elections, we had a very full manifesto. in terms of agriculture, business development.
Say, for
just
example,
the general
the health system. Again, it's often been said that UKIP supports some kind of Americanized insurance scheme.
UKIP, the people who developed the UKIP health policy are former staff nurses and doctors who served in the NHS, and they went through the proposals that they got in from all over the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland would have had its input as well. Scotland, Wales and the English regions, and we all submitted our own ideas, and they sifted through them and they produced a paper, and that paper came out and it said the health service must be maintained as it is, basically, and it's free at end use. So, and we don't discriminate against anybody in using that, but the one condition that we would make is that you're a UK citizen or, in terms of Northern Ireland, an Irish citizen who has paid into the system, or in the case of the Republic, where we have bilateral agreements where we will get recompense for any medical treatment.
Okay.
So that would be the only conditions that we would have put on it. We're opposed to health tourism, people deliberately coming in here to make use of the NHS, but in terms of treatment, we are completely free at the point of use.
Would you completely refute the notion that you make policy on the hoof and that you do have a wide range of policies?
I think you'll see actually that a lot of the older parties are now adopting many of the policies that we've developed. I know that in terms of taxation, taking people, anybody who pays a minimum wage, taking those people completely out of the tax bracket, I think that's a big plus.
Right.
And making sure that people who are on the minimum wage keep every penny they get.
Right.
I think that's a big step forward.
I saw your, I think, economics spokesman, Patrick O'Flynn, who must obviously have Irish origins.
Yes, yeah.
He was being interviewed on Newsnight a week or so ago. And my impression of what basically he was saying was that UKIP's economic policy is basically entrepreneur-driven and orientated towards small business.
That's right.
And holding big business to account.
Yeah.
Is that a fair assessment?
It is a fair assessment. UKIP are very concerned that if you go to the European Union and look who formulates policy, there's 3,000 lobby groups, and those 3,000 lobby groups represent 3,000 of the biggest businesses basically in Europe. And we're concerned that they make life difficult for smaller companies and actually harm competition. And if you look at the way EU directives do pan out when they're implemented into EU law, it is very damaging to small business. And we believe that the larger businesses should not be able to dictate economic policy. And something like 90% of the workforce in the UK are employed in companies with less than 50 people. So they're the companies that really do generate the wealth, and not the huge corporations.
Henry, another issue that I suppose in recent years the whole question of immigration has come onto the political agenda, but the word racism is often used, and sometimes it's said that your party is accused of being racist. How do you accept or refute that?
I honestly can't understand where people get that from. Maybe in the early days of the party there may have been an occasional racist comment made by people, but look at any political party in Northern Ireland, and certainly Nigel Farage, I regard him as a personal friend. He stayed in my home. We've socialised together, and I've never.
He likes to socialise, doesn't he?
He does. I've never even detected the slightest hint of racism from him. And if you look at the nature of the party in England, we've got all ethnic origin, people of all ethnic origins actively involved in the party. And we've got a Muslim MEP, we've got a Jewish MEP, we've got. Our bottom line is, we don't care who or what you are, what your ethnicity is, or your race is, or your religion is. Our bottom line is that you think that the UK is a good place to live and you want it to be free from EU interference. That's our bottom line.
Okay. Well, obviously the presence of UKIP, United Kingdom Independence Party, is part of a process of change within British politics. You also see that in Scotland, where there's a lot of change going on as well. And the traditional parties, the two mainstay parties, seem to be under some pressure. Where do you put yourself on the political spectrum of right or left, or do you see yourself as a populist party?
I would not see us as right or left. I would see us as centre. If you look at Paddy O'Flynn's economic policies, they're not the policies of some right-wing fanatic. The way that the Guardian will try and portray UKIP, that were these extreme right-wingers. If you look at our policies on the NHS, they're common sense, middle of the road policies aimed at providing a good service in the cheapest way possible and incorporating as many people as possible. We're not socialists. We believe that the entrepreneurial spirit is what drives a country, that what creates the wealth, that pays for the NHS. So we're not socialist in terms of business, and we will allow the guy who wants to do business to really do business and succeed and create wealth and create jobs. But in terms of the social aspect of UKIP, we do believe that government has a role in looking after the poor and the vulnerable and the disabled and the less fortunate in society.
Okay. But I suppose, like any party within your broad membership, you have a spectrum.
There is a spectrum.
Like in any organisation.
Yeah,
there tends to be a right and left in any organisation.
That is one of the remarkable things about UKIP, that you cannot call it right or left. It's more of a movement rather than a political party in many ways.
Right. Do you, do you have a relationship with other, say, similar parties in other places? Do you have any connections with any political organisation in the south of Ireland and the Republic, or with any continental parties of a similar philosophy?
We have an office up at Stormont there now. It does party support, and that number is commonly available. And the number of calls that we get from the Republic is staggering. From fishermen over the water crisis down there, people looking advice on how to oppose what's been implemented down there. And we don't have any formal contacts with political parties there. In Europe, given the nature of how the committee structures operate there, you have to form allegiances with at least with MEPs from at least 7 other countries before you can get established as a group to get speaking rights in the Parliament and that. So that's just something that has to happen in Europe.
Right. And I think there was some case recently where membership of one of the groups in the European Parliament, there was some link you had with some Polish party that was quite controversial. Is that?
There was a Polish, well, what happened was we had a Latvian MEP and she was actually blackmailed, or not blackmailed, bribed by the President of the European Parliament that she could lead a delegation on some issue to some overseas trip on the provision that she resign from the Europe of Freedom and Democracy group, which is mainly the UKIP group. And that girl did resign, and that meant then that we had lost the group status because we didn't have the 7 EU countries represented.
Right.
But Farage went to a guy who was operating outside of a Polish group, who had originally been in that Polish group but now operates outside it, and asked him would he be prepared to join the European Freedom and Democracy group, and he did. And then that re-established the UKIP Freedom and Democracy group within the European Parliament. Now, some of these people are unsavoury. We don't like some of these people. That's been quite honest about it. And there are people who have made anti-Semitic comments that we are completely opposed to. There are people who have very, very strong religious views. That Polish guy has very, very strong religious views. But what we say is you're entitled to hold your views, but you can't let those views represent the views of all the people who are in this grouping. So,
just coming back here to Northern Ireland again, Henry, something like the Common Agricultural Policy, if the UK were to leave, there's a referendum 2017 and Britain, the UK leaves the European Union, things like the Common Agricultural Policy, do you think that vacuum can be easily filled?
Absolutely, yes? Absolutely. In fact, that's part of our policy that was developed here in Northern Ireland, that we would actually maintain a single farm payment, a UK single farm payment. But what we would do, like every modern industrialised nation needs continuity of supply of food, and Britain is only producing 55% of the food that we need at the present time. So UKIP sees the very real need to maintain a healthy agriculture. What the European Common Agriculture Policy is doing is actually damaging and restricting our agriculture. And what we have said is we will maintain a single farm payment that will actually be worth more to the actual farmer. But what we will do is we will dismantle this plethora of bureaucracy that accompanies a single farm payment, like cross-compliance and that type of thing. And we will allow the farmers to produce the food that the country needs. And there will be instances where intervention may even be needed again in the future, where we won't shy away from that. So whenever we have had discussions with farmers, whenever they hear our policy, they're delighted with it, and they would, be very accepting of it.
Obviously, we don't have time to delve too much into our own local politics here, which would require a lot of time. But there's a lot of transition going on here. There's a talks process. I would listen to some politicians the other night. Donny Kennedy was among them. Alistair MacDonald was on the panel, and there's talk about the possibility of opposition. There's been set up at Stormont. There's talk about electoral pacts between the likes of the Ulster Unionists and the SDLP, the Ulster Unionists and the DUP. But in one or two sentences, where do you think we're going in this region politically, and what would your broad aspiration be? Do you support the Good Friday Agreement, for example? Or?
Well, the Good Friday Agreement's there. It's operational. That there's no point in saying you either support it or you oppose it. There was a referendum and people voted for it, so it's there. In terms of Stormont, the present system has institutionalised sectarianism. There's no question or doubt about that. And we have to get back to some form of opposition politics. Now, the tribal politics that did exist in Northern Ireland, I think people are mature enough now that if some party does get into power, it's not going to deliberately discriminate against one section of the community. That couldn't happen ever again. So I honestly think that we do need to move to an opposition, a healthy, athletic opposition, not some cobbled up thing. But the likes of Scotland, we should emulate what happens in Scotland. And if you look at Scotland, the way that they've been able to spend their money, the way they've been held accountable. I don't like the SNP. I wonder why. I was the only politician from Northern Ireland who actually went over there and lobbied against a yes vote. But you have to hand it to the SNP in terms of
they're some operators, aren't they?
They are shrewd operators, and they have delivered a lot for the Scottish people through the way that they've allocated their budget. Now compare that to Northern Ireland, and where are even the Welsh are a lot better at administering their budget than what we are.
But we're very locked into our own. We're navel gazers really here in many respects.
But it's the institutionalised sectarianism of Stormont. It provides cover for the political parties because they can all. There's such a symbiotic relationship that they can blame each other for things that go wrong, and everybody claims anything.
Very briefly, I know you rightly say we have the Good Friday Agreement. We're in April 2015. We're the super councils, and you'll be a member of the new super council. There'll be the inception of super councils. Would you be in favour? Would UKIP be in favour of more devolution of power and responsibility to these super councils?
Absolutely. That's a fundamental part of our policy, that you put power as close to the people as possible. And you know, while I'm a member of the new Super Council, I actually opposed the introduction of them because I believed that reducing the number of councillors actually takes democracy further away from the people. And you know, to have salaried councillors in this new Super Council is going to create another tier of a paid political class. I don't believe that's the right way to go in local politics. And if you look at the Republic, look at England, you've got parish councils, town councils, borough councils, district councils, county councils. Whereas what do we have? We've got the Assembly and now this new tier of Super Council.
Right.
So I think there is a democratic deficit.
But would you like to see the Super Councils assuming a more muscular role?
I would like to see the Super Councils having more powers devolved to them from central government, and I would like to see that implemented on the ground through the likes of parish councils. They're very inexpensive. Community councils, as they have in Scotland.
Yes.
Which would be the equivalent to the old parish councils.
Okay. No, I mean, there was a lady in yesterday from an organisation called the East Border Region, which is based here in Uri. I was quite surprised that from the mid-70s there has been considerable cooperation between councils north and south of the border here. So I think the whole area of local councils, local authorities is an interesting area for political evolution here, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Going back to just the broader issues, where do you think UKIP will be post May 2015? What I know nobody can predict. This coming year, there's a general election, a UK general election.
I think.
What do you think the outcome's going to be?
I think if we can keep the momentum going that it's building, I think UKIP could end up with 15 MPs. I think UKIP has a real possibility of holding the balance of power. Now, 15 is a conservative estimate. If we keep making inroads in the north of England into the Labour vote there, anything is possible. We actually had a UKIP member from East Belfast who almost won a Super Council seat, and he's a Northern Irish guy, but from East Belfast, on a temporary work contract in England, and he has won the candidacy for a seat in the Midlands there. So, we are a whole of UK party, and I think that we're really going to progress over the years.
And you think UKIP possibly will hold the balance of power? There's obviously, there seems to be an internal meltdown within the Labour Party in some respects. It seems that Scotland is...
SNP are going to damage the Labour Party.
So do you think there will be a Conservative government that will depend on UKIP?
Well, if the SNP and the Labour together could still do it. It depends how many votes. The Labour collapse in Scotland may not be as catastrophic as what commentators are saying. Certainly whenever I was there, I got the impression that a lot of Labour voters were going to vote yes in the referendum, but would revert to a Labour-style candidate for the Holyrood again. So it may not be as catastrophic as what we think, but I think that UKIP are going to take votes of both of the main established parties in GB.
In England, essentially. Because
well,
Scotland is slightly different.
We have some target seats in Scotland as well. We've got a few target seats here also in Northern Ireland, where we know that we polled extremely well in some areas as a result of the European elections, when we got 25,000 votes. And so I think it's just... Politics is in such a transitional phase now.
I think
it's difficult. It's actually difficult to make predictions.
To call.
It's actually very, very difficult to make predictions.
Yes. Okay. Do you think David Cameron will hold a referendum in 2017?
I don't trust David Cameron.
Do you think he'd wriggle out of it if he could?
Well, cast iron Dave. He promised referendums the last time round, and as soon as he got into power, that promise vaporised. He promised a Commons vote on the European arrest warrant. When it come to it, he said no. He put the whips on and said there's going to be no vote here.
Right.
You know, how can you trust a man like that? I certainly don't trust him.
Right.
I see Cameron as a EU puppet in many ways.
Right. Is it your mission to hold the balance in power and to ensure that there is a referendum? Is that your bottom line?
Well, that's the bottom line, but we will also have a lot of influence over policy.
Okay. Okay.
You know, we've now got 1.6 trillion of debt. The deficit this month, something like 7.5 billion. We just can't keep going on like that. You know, the country has to, and you know, it's not sustainable.
Okay.
And at some stage, people are going to have to. We're going to end up like the Republic of Ireland for a few years. We're going to have very, very extreme austerity measures. We're going to have to implement that right across the UK.
You think
at
the
some
Republic's
stage.
already done the
The Republic has done it. Now, the European Union pushed the Republic into it, but Britain, the
think has
UK,
to go through the
is
same
essentially going to have to go down that same road. Maybe not to the same extreme as the Republic or Greece, but certainly we're going to have to make,
Right.
you know, we're going to have to really take that bull by the horn at some stage.
Okay, Henry, just finally, in closure, because I'm conscious of time running out on us. 2017 comes along, there's a referendum, Britain leaves. What will be the impact on Britain, leaving the European Union? There's a lot of vested interest, like business interests and stuff like that, that say being in part of the European Union is vital. Although I did hear a British industrialist, Dyson, on the radio this morning saying that he was in favour of leaving the EU, actually. I was very surprised by that. What about things like membership of NATO and the shape of Europe? What will happen in the European Union if Britain leaves? Because if you pull one brick out from a structure...
Well, Britain's a former, a founder member of NATO. NATO will be there regardless of what political structures there are in Brussels. In terms of business and trade, we have a huge, an absolutely huge trade deficit with the rest of Europe. Britain is the honeypot for European manufacturers. So if we pull out of Europe, there's going to be a free trade agreement. That's going to still be there. So there's absolutely no need for anyone in business to fear UK withdrawal from the European Union. So, you know, whenever people say, oh, we'll lose 2 million jobs, you continually hear this, 2 million manufacturing jobs. It's absolute nonsense and rubbish, really.
Right. I mean, basically the scenario you see is that Britain can have bilateral relations with Europe.
We will maintain
our two-way relations.
Yeah, we will maintain a free trade agreement with that economic bloc, but we will then be allowed to make our own trade agreements with. We are now represented in the World Trade negotiations by the European Union. Now, in terms of manufacturing, they will do what suits Germany. In terms of agriculture, they'll do what suits France. In terms of fisheries, they'll do what suits Spain. We have continually lost out in those trade negotiations over the years. And whenever we leave that, we will then be our own entity, still the sixth biggest trading nation in the world, sixth biggest economy. You know, we're not some small Mickey Mouse continental country that needs the shelter of Germany and France. We can be big players in the world stage again. So we can make our own trade agreements with the emerging countries and former Commonwealth countries.
But if Britain were to leave the European Union, do you think it's possible that the present European Union could unravel?
I don't think it would, because Germany will not allow it to unravel. You know, it really is a German project when you go back to the origins of it, and they are not going to allow it to unravel. It's if you look at the trade that Germany does with the rest of Europe, it's in their interest to maintain it.
If some kind of more democratized federal core emerged in Europe, would you be in favour of being involved in a looser, broader European association?
No, because the EU is irreformable. It's impossible to reform the European Union. Yeah, you know, if you go to the European Free Trade area, EEA, isn't it?
EFTA.
European Free Trade Area, yes, which includes Norway and Switzerland and countries like that. You know, that operates in an effective fashion. If you go to Spain, you have your blue medical insurance card. People say, oh, but look what the European Union done for us. That's not. That was brought through the cooperation through that grouping. So you don't need to have your inner workings of government dictated through EU directives to be able to cooperate and work with other European countries.
So it's kind of cooperation, measured harmonisation on an agreement, an agreement by agreement basis.
Yes,
okay.
That's I could see that working. And if you look at the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, they operate more or less on those grounds.
Henry, we could sit here for another hour or two discussing what is a very big subject.
You're obviously a very, very knowledgeable guy in Europe because it's very rarely I get asked those questions. So I've enjoyed it. I've very much enjoyed it. It's refreshing, to be honest.
I've enjoyed it as well. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Okay.